Berkshire Hathaway has underperformed in the second quarter, fallen over 10% since Warren Buffett's announced his intention to retire as CEO and elevate current Vice Chairman Greg in his place. The conglomerate, with big stakes, of course, in Kraft Heinz, Occidental Petroleum, American Express, set to report quarterly results August 4th. Is now a good time to buy shares on recent weakness? Well, here with more on that very question, we got Bill Stone, the Glenview Trust Company Chief Investment Officer. Bill, always great to see you. Maybe, Bill, let's start with the stock here. It is down about 12% here, Bill, since that annual meeting back in May. Why is that, Bill? What's going on there?
Well, I know some people say it's because, Warren Buffett, said he was going to step down as CEO at the end of the year. I actually think it has a lot more to do with the macro environment. When you look at it, you could almost lay it right on top of kind of the outperformance of Berkshire at the beginning of the year came as the worries around tariffs and the economy rose. The stock just really took off. And then as, kind of in that May period, which just happened to fall, like you said, in that same period when the meeting was, then as that receded, then the stock went, really started to underperform. I just think of it as Berkshire's kind of the perfect stock to own when you're worried about the world for two reasons. One is this massive amount of cash they hold, but two is because you expect they should be able to take advantage of it if in fact you get big sell-offs in the market or dislocations. When you're not as worried about that, like we haven't been here for the last quarter, you're not as excited about Berkshire Hathaway.
Well, let me ask you, Bill. Buffett is stepping down. Greg Abel taking the reins. As a shareholder, how do you feel about that changing of the guard?
Well, you can't, follow the goat and expect to feel good about it. I do think Greg has shown up as a very good operator. In fact, I think you could argue probably a better operator than Buffett, because frankly, Buffett doesn't want to spend his time operating businesses necessarily or getting into the weeds of them. So I think he's very competent, and for a company that is already so large, I think there's already been some distinct benefits from having him already take on a much larger role. Again, would I rather Buffett was going to live forever and keep running it? Of course, but I can't have that.
Do you think this weakness, Bill, in the stock, buying opportunity in your opinion?
Yeah, I think it's back to a point where you can feel pretty good about owning it. We're back down to 1.5 times book, still maybe a little rich. That would, the way I kind of think of it is I would suspect we won't see any buybacks, stock buybacks from Berkshire Hathaway. I kind of frankly just try and, essentially I get more interested as I suspect they're getting more interested, because they're the ones that know the intrinsic value certainly even better than I do. But I don't think you're crazy here. When it got up to like 1.8 times book, it was an expensive stock, not that it's a reason to sell it. It's just probably was a reason to slow down owning it. I think now you can be back to at least slowly get, grabbing some as you go.
What do you expect to see the earnings results, Bill?
I don't think they're going to be great. Obviously the headline, all of the stock increases show up there. Although I will say a lot of their big holdings didn't have a good quarter in the second quarter. So like Apple was down in the second quarter, Chevron, Occidental Petroleum. They did have nice moves out of Bank of America and American Express. But anyway, set that aside. I think if you really are looking at the stock, you don't pay much attention to the headline earnings numbers. You really have to look at operating earnings. Those are likely to be not great, probably, in terms of year over year. They may actually even be down year over year. What it really will be is probably a solid, report out of the insurance sector, because you can pretty much bank on that they'll have a nice amount of interest income off the amount of cash they're holding. But then on the other side, they're going to have almost certainly some, pain on the housing related companies they own and the retailing companies that they own. So it's tough to see how it all plays out. Again, doesn't get me overly upset. I know it's a very diversified company. We'll see how I also should say the railroad's probably not going to have great numbers, although it could be okay. It's really hard with Berkshire because they don't give you any guidance and really give you no clues. So you're really working in the dark, other than trying to look at what other companies in those industries have done, or maybe we've seen their earnings and back into it a little bit.
Another question I had for you was, it was just that the mountain of cash obviously Berkshire sits on, listen, investors they're gonna trust Buffett to sit on that kind of mountain of cash, greatest value investor of all time, the Oracle himself. But with Greg Abel, do you think he steps in here and makes changes in terms of how Berkshire thinks about allocating capital?
I think, I always think of it as you're exactly right with what you're saying. Warren Buffett gets way more room than any other CEO on the planet, and rightly so. Again, he's earned it, right? Abel comes in, and I suspect they'll give him some time, but I would certainly expect there'll be agitation, right? If the view is that he's just going to sit on it, or at least give some out or whatever you want to say, you're right. I mean, it's a little tougher right now because, I think Buffett and company and I was actually happy when the stock was a bit lower, in the sense of they could use a lot of that cash or some portion of that cash to buy back shares, and that makes it a essentially cheaper way to kind of raise earnings and actually create value. At the moment, that leverage or that lever, I believe, is off the table. Like I said, I don't think you'll see any of that. So maybe he'll, I'll say, quote unquote, get lucky into having some opportunities to deploy capital that way, or hey, maybe a big deal. The guy certainly was involved in big part of Berkshire Hathaway Energy and those things, so he knows how to make a deal.
Yeah, he's got the operations background for sure. Bill,